The Meridian High Council's crystalline chamber pulsed with electric blue light, a sign of their collective agitation. Ambassador Thara Morgan stood before them, her dark skin contrasting sharply against her white diplomatic uniform, unfazed by the dazzling display. The council's bioluminescent patterns indicated their growing unease with her presence, the first human to ever set foot in their sacred halls. "Your species emerged from a death world," resonated First Speaker Vextil, his crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns. "Yet you stand here without protective gear, without augmentation, without fear." Thara smiled, a gesture that sent ripples of confusion through the assembled Meridians. Their species communicated through light patterns and electromagnetic pulses. Facial expressions were an alien concept to them. "We evolved on Earth, yes," she replied, her voice steady and clear. "What you call a death world, we call home. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, aggressive fauna, and volatile weather, these challenges shaped us." The chamber dimmed slightly, a sign of contemplation among the Meridians. Their civilization had evolved in the stable crystal caves of their homeworld, Lumina Prime, where environmental conditions remained constant for millennia. The concept of adapting to change was almost heretical to their worldview. Second Speaker Rixthar shifted forward, her crystalline structure emitting cautionary pulses. "Your species has achieved faster-than-light travel within mere centuries of discovering atomic energy. This rate of advancement disturbs the natural order." "Perhaps," Thara countered, "it's not the natural order that's being disturbed, but rather your perception of it. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our physical resilience, it's our adaptability." The chamber erupted in a cascade of conflicting light patterns as the council members communicated among themselves. Thara had been briefed about this possibility. The Meridians, despite their advanced technology and ancient civilization, had a rigid social structure that struggled with rapid change. Commander Dax Rees watched from the observation deck above, his military uniform bearing the insignia of the United Earth Defense Force. He had argued against sending a single unarmed diplomat to meet the Meridian High Council, but Thara had insisted. Sometimes, she had told him, the greatest show of strength is the willingness to be vulnerable. The light patterns in the chamber suddenly synchronized, forming a coherent message that the human translators decoded. "You propose an alliance between our species, yet your very nature represents chaos to our order. How can such different beings coexist?" Thara reached into her pocket and withdrew a simple prism, a gesture that immediately captured the Meridian's attention. She held it up to the ambient light, creating a rainbow that danced across the crystalline walls. "Like this," she said, rotating the prism slowly. Different wavelengths of light, existing independently yet creating something beautiful together. Chaos and order aren't opposites, they're complementary forces. The chamber fell silent, the light patterns freezing in place. Then gradually, the patterns began to shift into something new, a harmony of rhythmic pulses that the human observers had never seen before. First Speaker Vextil's form brightened considerably. "In all our millennia of existence," he resonated, "no species has ever approached diplomacy quite like this. Perhaps there is wisdom in chaos after all." Commander Rees smiled from his observation post. This was why humanity had chosen Thara, not because she was the most experienced diplomat, but because she understood that sometimes the best way to bridge gaps between species was to embrace their differences rather than minimize them. The meeting marked the beginning of an unprecedented alliance, one that would soon reshape the political landscape of the galaxy. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger universe, not through force or technological superiority, but through the simple understanding that strength comes in many forms. Last edited 5 minutes ago, 6 months after the historic Meridian Alliance, Dr. Maya Patel stood before the Galactic Communication Council aboard Station Babel, her innovative translation matrix hovering as a hologram behind her. Representatives from 12 spacefaring civilizations watched with varying degrees of skepticism, some through atmospheric suits, others through proxy drones. The Universal Translation Protocol isn't just about converting words, Maya explained, her dark eyes bright with enthusiasm. It's about understanding the fundamental patterns of thought that shape communication itself. The swarm mind of the Vectari, appearing as a shimmering cloud of neural-linked nanites, pulsed with doubt. Our collective consciousness cannot be reduced to simple language patterns. Previous attempts have failed. Maya gestured to her holographic display, which showed an intricate web of interconnected neural pathways. That's because previous attempts tried to translate the words, not the intent. We humans have thousands of languages on our home world alone. We learned long ago that communication transcends vocabulary. The Meridian representative, Vextel, emitted supportive light patterns. Their successful alliance with humanity had earned them the position of co-chairs for this initiative. Observe, Maya continued, activating her matrix. The hologram expanded, filling the chamber with a dazzling display of interconnected patterns, light pulses for the meridians, pheromone maps for the insectoid Shirai, electromagnetic frequencies for the Vectari, and dozens of other communication methods all flowing together. Ambassador Kix of the Shirai clicked their mandibles thoughtfully. Your species achieved this breakthrough in mere months. We had motivation, Maya replied with a slight smile. When you have over 7 billion humans speaking different languages, you learn to look for universal patterns. We applied the same principle here, just on a larger scale. The chamber's atmosphere shifted as the implications became clear. The translation barrier had been the single greatest obstacle to galactic cooperation. Without reliable communication, trade agreements took years to negotiate, and cultural exchange was nearly impossible. Commander Reeves, standing at the back of the chamber, watched with pride. He had initially been skeptical of Dr. Patel's approach, preferring the traditional method of developing individual translation protocols for each species. But Maya had insisted that the solution lay in finding the common threads that connected all sentient communication. The matrix adapts, she continued, demonstrating how the system learned and evolved with each interaction. It doesn't just translate words or signals, it learns the cultural context, the underlying meanings, the subtle nuances that make communication meaningful. The Vectari cloud shifted, forming into a rough approximation of a human face, their attempt at showing respect through mimicry. We detect no loss of meaning in the translation. This is unprecedented. The Shirai representatives stepped forward, their compound eyes reflecting the holographic display. Your species continues to surprise us, first with your diplomatic approach to the meridians, and now this. Perhaps we underestimated the advantages of evolving on a, what did you call it? A deaf world, Maya replied. When you grow up in an environment that constantly challenges you, you learn to think creatively. Every problem has a solution. Sometimes you just need to look at it from a different angle. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices, lights, and signals, all perfectly translated by the matrix. Questions flowed freely, understanding blossomed, and barriers that had stood for millennia began to crumble. In the observation deck above, Thara Morgan watched with satisfaction. She had championed Maya's project from the beginning, understanding that humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy might not be their technology or their resilience, but their unique way of seeing connections where others saw only differences. The translation protocol would later be recognized as the catalyst that transformed galactic society. It wasn't just a tool for communication. It was proof that understanding could bridge even the widest gaps between species. Humanity had once again demonstrated that their greatest strength lay not in power, but in their ability to bring others together. Admiral Sara Martinez watched from the bridge of the UES Endeavour as the combined fleet assembled for the first Galactic Defense Initiative wargames. Ships of various designs and sizes formed intricate patterns against the backdrop of the Proxima Centauri system. Crystalline Meridian vessels pulsing with internal light, massive Shirai hive ships that resembled orbital coral reefs, and the quantum-shifted forms of Vectari crafts. All participants are in position, Admiral, reported Lieutenant Raj Kumar, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. Though I'm still reading some. Uncertainty from our allies. Sarah understood their hesitation. The concept of military exercises without actual combat was foreign to most galactic species. War, for them, was either total or non-existent. There was no middle ground for practice. "Open channel to all commands," she ordered, straightening her uniform. "This is Admiral Martinez. Today's exercise will demonstrate the human concept of adaptive warfare. Each fleet will be divided into red and blue teams. Your objective is not to destroy, but to learn." The translation protocol conveyed her words perfectly, but the responses showed lingering confusion. "We do not understand the purpose of simulated conflict," came the crystalline resonance of Meridian Commander Luxaura. "Combat efficiency is determined by technological superiority." Sarah smiled. "Is it? Let's test that theory. First scenario begins in 5 minutes. Remember, no actual weapons discharge. All hits will be registered by the simulation network." As the fleets divided into their assigned teams, Commander Reeves joined her on the bridge. "They think we're crazy," he observed, amusement in his voice. The Vectari analyst called it organized chaos. "They're not wrong," Sarah replied. "That's exactly what it is." The exercise began, and immediately the technological superiority of the alien fleets became apparent. The Meridian ships moved with perfect precision, their formations mathematically flawless. The Vectari craft shifted through quantum states, appearing and disappearing at will. The Jirai high ships coordinated with a single mind. And yet, something was missing. Sarah waited until the perfect moment, then gave the signal. The human ships, significantly less advanced than their allies, began executing seemingly random maneuvers. They broke formation, scattered in apparently disorganized patterns, and created what looked like chaos in the carefully orchestrated battlefield. "What are they doing?" The Jirai commander's confusion translated clearly. "Their formations are completely illogical." Then the trap closed. The scattered human ships had herded their opponents into overlapping fields of fire. The more advanced alien vessels, for all their technology, had followed predictable patterns that the humans had anticipated and exploited. "Simulation complete," Sarah announced. In a real engagement, 40% of both fleets would have been disabled, not by superior technology, but by unexpected tactics. The silence that followed was profound. Then Commander Luxaura's voice came through, tinged with what the translation protocol identified as amazement. "You intentionally appeared weak to expose our assumptions." "Precisely," Sarah confirmed. "In human military history, we learned that victory often goes not to the strongest force, but to the most adaptable. Technology is a tool, not a guarantee." Over the next several hours, the combined fleet ran through dozens of scenarios. With each exercise, the alien commanders began to understand. They watched as human ships used stellar phenomena as cover, executed complicated feints, and employed strategies that seemed to defy conventional logic. "Your species," the Vectari Collective observed, "treats warfare as an art rather than a science." "We treat it as both," Commander Reeves corrected. "Science tells us what's possible. Art shows us what's effective." By the end of the day, the alien commanders had begun experimenting with their own unconventional tactics. The Meridian ships attempted unpredictable maneuvers, while the Jirai tested decentralized command structures. Even the Vectari started incorporating elements of misdirection into their quantum jumps. Admiral Martinez logged the final results with satisfaction. The exercise had achieved its true purpose, not to demonstrate human military prowess, but to show their allies that strength came in many forms. Innovation, adaptability, and unpredictability were just as important as raw power. As the fleets began their dispersal, Sarah received a private message from Luxaura. "We believed we were teaching humans about advanced warfare. Instead, you taught us about the advantages of uncertainty. Perhaps this is why your species survived your death world, You never stop learning new ways to overcome challenges. Sarah's response was simple. That's the most important lesson of all. In space, just like on Earth, the moment you stop adapting is the moment you start losing. Red emergency lights pulsed through Station Babel as Dr. Maya Patel raced through the corridors alongside Commander Reeves. The translation protocol was working overtime, converting the panicked communications of a dozen species into comprehensible warnings. The Nexus tear is expanding exponentially, Maya reported, pulling up holographic data streams as they ran. The Meridian quantum sensors estimate total collapse of the trade lane network within 48 hours. The central command center was chaos incarnate. Representatives from every major spacefaring species crowded around the massive holographic display showing the growing spatial anomaly. The Nexus, a natural phenomenon that enabled faster-than-light travel through regulated corridors of spacetime, was unraveling. First speaker Vextil's crystalline form pulsed with urgent patterns. Our civilizations depend on the Nexus network. Without it, billions will be stranded, supply lines will collapse. We understand the stakes, Commander Reeves interrupted, his voice steady. That's why we called in our specialist. The chamber's doors opened to admit a disheveled woman in a stained lab coat, her gray hair escaping from a hasty ponytail. Dr. Eleanor Wright, Earth's leading expert on spatial mechanics, didn't bother with formalities. Show me the initial tear point, she demanded, moving straight to the holographic display. The vectoric cloud shifted aside, their collective consciousness radiating respect for her focused intensity. The Nexus has existed for millions of years, the Jurei representative clicked. Our combined scientists have failed to stabilize it. What can one human possibly? There. Eleanor pointed to a seemingly random point in the visualization. Maya, enhance this sector. Commander, I need access to every ship with a mass driver within range. The alien representatives exchanged confused signals, but Commander Reeves had learned to trust human intuition. You heard her. All vessels with mass drivers are to report their positions immediately. Eleanor was already deep in calculations, her fingers dancing through holographic equations. The Nexus isn't just unraveling, it's trying to heal itself. But it's like a wound that keeps getting pulled open. Explain, Vextil demanded, his crystalline structure refracting light in patterns of intense interest. On Earth, we have these things called rivers, Eleanor said, not looking up from her work. Sometimes they get blocked, and the pressure builds until it finds a new path. But if you're clever, you can. She paused, eyes widening. That's it. We don't need to fix the tear. We need to give it somewhere else to go. Maya caught on first, her fingers flying over her own console. Like a controlled burn to stop a forest fire, we create a smaller, manageable tear to relieve the pressure on the main system. Precisely. Eleanor's eyes lit up. Commander, I need those ships positioned in a very specific pattern. We're going to perform emergency surgery on spacetime itself. What followed was a masterclass in human improvisation. Under Eleanor's direction, ships from a dozen species moved into formation. Mass drivers, typically used for launching cargo, were repurposed as spatial pressure points. The translation protocol worked at maximum capacity, converting Eleanor's rapid-fire instructions into commands each species could understand and execute. This is madness, the Vectari collective pulsed. The calculations alone would take our best computers weeks to. Sometimes you have to trust your gut. Eleanor shot back, then immediately regretted her choice of words as the translation protocol struggled to convey the concept to species that didn't have digestive systems. Trust in experience, in intuition refined by knowledge. The next 6 hours were the longest of their lives. Ships fired their mass drivers in precisely timed sequences, creating a complex web of gravitational distortions. Eleanor coordinated it all, making split-second adjustments based on sensor data and what she called the feel of it. When the final sequence initiated, everyone held their breath, all their species equivalent. For a moment, space itself seemed to shudder. The tear in the nexus pulsed, expanded, and then suddenly contracted, following the path of least resistance that Eleanor's impromptu network had created. The emergency lights faded. The holographic display showed the nexus stabilizing, the catastrophic tear reduced to a manageable anomaly that the natural system could heal on its own. How? Vextil's question encompassed more than just the technical achievement. How did you know this would work? Eleanor finally allowed herself to sit down, exhaustion evident on her face. We didn't. But on Earth, we learned that sometimes the best solution isn't the most elegant one. Sometimes you have to work with nature instead of trying to control it. Commander Rees watched as the alien representatives huddled around Eleanor, their questions flowing through the translation protocol in a cascade of curiosity. This was humanity's true gift to the galaxy, not just solving problems, but showing others new ways to think about them. Necessity is the mother of invention, Maya quoted softly beside him. Another Earth saying that the translation protocol has trouble with. Maybe, Reeves replied, but I think they're starting to understand it anyway. The grand gallery aboard Station Babel had been transformed, where once stark corridors reflected the utilitarian needs of space station architecture. Now vibrant splashes of color, sound, and motion filled every available space. The first galactic cultural exhibition was underway, and humanity had decided to make an impression. Farrah Morgan stood beside Ambassador Kix of the Jury, watching as a holographic orchestra performed Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. The insectoid diplomat's antennae swayed in perfect rhythm with the music, their compound eyes reflecting the dynamic light display that accompanied the performance. We do not understand, Kix clicked softly, the translation protocol conveying both confusion and wonder. These sound patterns serve no practical purpose, yet they create sensations we cannot describe. We call it emotion, Farrah explained. Art isn't about practicality, it's about expression, about sharing experiences that transcend language. Across the gallery, Dr. Maya Patel was explaining the concept of abstract painting to a group of meridians. Their crystalline forms pulsed with increasing intensity as they studied a recreation of Van Gogh's Starry Night. The artist saw these stars from your death world. First speaker Vextil asked, his light patterns showing genuine curiosity, and chose to represent them inaccurately. Maya smiled. He painted them not as they were, but as they made him feel. Sometimes truth isn't about perfect reproduction, it's about capturing the essence of an experience. The Vectari Collective had been particularly fascinated by human dance performances. Their nanite cloud formed and reformed, attempting to mimic the fluid movements of ballet dancers. The sight of their efforts had drawn a crowd of both humans and aliens, leading to an impromptu dance lesson that the translation protocols struggled to convey in purely technical terms. Commander Rees found Dr. Eleanor Wright in a quiet corner, showing a group of young Meridians how to play chess. The crystalline beings had initially approached it as a pure mathematical exercise, but Eleanor was teaching them something different. Sometimes, she explained, moving a knight in its distinctive L shape, the best strategy isn't the most obvious one. Chess isn't just about rules, it's about imagination, about seeing possibilities. The exhibition had other surprises. A human chef had set up a cultural exchange kitchen, carefully adapting Earth recipes for different alien physiologies. The jury were particularly taken with spicy foods, their mandibles clicking in appreciation of flavors they had never experienced before. But perhaps the most profound impact came from the storytelling chamber. Here, humans shared their literature, their myths, their histories, not just through the translation protocol, but through a complex network of sensory inputs that Maya had helped design. Alien species could experience human stories in ways that resonated with their own forms of consciousness. Your species creates fiction, a Vectari observer noted, their cloud forming the approximate shape of a question mark. You deliberately tell stories that are not true. We create stories that contain truth, even if the events never happened, Farrah explained. Through fiction, we explore possibilities, share perspectives, and understand ourselves better. The impact was undeniable. Meridian artists began experimenting with emotional light patterns rather than just practical communications. Jarre composers started incorporating human musical concepts into their traditional resonance chambers. Even the Vectari collective began exploring the possibility of using their nanite forms for artistic expression. As the day progressed, something remarkable happened. The rigid boundaries between species began to blur, not physically, but culturally. The translation protocol captured fragments of human idioms being adapted into alien languages. Hybrid art forms emerged spontaneously as different species collaborated and experimented. "I believe we underestimated your species," Kix admitted to Thara as they watched a group of human children teaching alien diplomats to fly kites in the station's artificial gravity field. "We thought technology and survival skills were your only contributions to galactic society." "Culture is how we survived," Thara replied. "Art, music, stories, they're not just entertainment. They're how we make sense of our world, how we share experiences, how we connect with others who are different from us." Commander Reeves, observing from his usual quiet corner, couldn't help but smile. In all their preparations for joining the galactic community, humans had focused on proving their technological and diplomatic worth. Yet here, in the simple act of sharing their creativity, they had perhaps made their most significant impact. "Your species," Vextil observed, his crystalline form glowing with new patterns inspired by human art, "does not just adapt to the universe. You imagine ways to change it." "That's what makes us human," Maya responded. "We don't just see what is, we see what could be." The council chamber of Station Babel hummed with anticipation. Representatives from 27 spacefaring civilizations gathered for what would become known as the Convergence Summit. At the center of the chamber stood the architects of change: Thara Morgan, Dr. Maya Patel, Admiral Sarah Martinez, Dr. Eleanor Wright, and Commander Reeves. "The old ways of galactic governance are failing," Thara began, her voice carried clearly by the enhanced translation protocol. "The recent Nexus crisis proved that we need something more than just treaties and trade agreements." The Meridian first speaker Vextil's crystalline form pulsed in agreement. "In mere years, humanity has demonstrated alternatives we never considered. Perhaps it is time for a new approach." The holographic displays activated, showing a complex network of interconnected systems, trade routes, communication channels, cultural exchanges, and defense protocols, all flowing together in an organic pattern that reminded many of Earth's neural networks. "We propose the formation of the Galactic Coalition," Admiral Martinez continued. "Not an empire, not a federation, but something new. A living alliance that adapts and grows, just as humanity learned to do on our death world." Dr. Maya stepped forward, her hands weaving through the holographic display. "The translation protocol has evolved beyond mere language conversion. It now maps the connections between our civilizations, showing us how our differences can become strengths." The Vectari collective shifted, their nanite cloud forming complex patterns. "You suggest we abandon thousands of years of established protocol." "No," Commander Reeves replied. "We suggest we build upon them. Take what works, adapt what doesn't, create something greater than the sum of its parts." Dr. Eleanor brought up new displays, showing the success of their various initiatives. The military exercises that had revolutionized galactic defense strategies, the cultural exhibitions that had sparked unprecedented artistic collaboration, the scientific breakthroughs that had come from combining different species' approaches to problems. "Look at what we've already accomplished together," she urged. The Nexus crisis wasn't solved by human ingenuity alone. It was solved by combining human intuition with Meridian technology, Vectari quantum mechanics, and Jarre collective coordination. Ambassador Kix clicked their mandibles thoughtfully. "Your species speaks of chaos as if it were an ally." "Because it is," Thara smiled. "Chaos is just change we haven't learned to understand yet. The coalition would be designed to embrace change, to evolve with it rather than resist it." The proposal was revolutionary. Instead of rigid hierarchies, the coalition would feature rotating leadership roles. Rather than enforce standardization, it would celebrate and utilize the unique characteristics of each species. The translation protocol would serve as its foundation, not just facilitating communication, but actively identifying opportunities for collaboration and innovation. Consider the military exercises, Admiral Martinez added. We learned that true strength comes not from superiority, but from diversity. Each species brings unique perspectives, unique solutions. Together, we become more than we could ever be alone. The chamber erupted in a cascade of communications, light patterns, pheromone signals, quantum fluctuations, and verbal exchanges all flowing through the translation protocol. The discussion continued for hours, but something had fundamentally shifted in the galaxy's power structure. As the summit drew to a close, first speaker Vextail addressed the chamber. When humans first emerged from their death world, we thought them primitive, dangerous, unpredictable. We were right, and we were wrong. They are all these things, but they have shown us that these traits, properly understood, are not weaknesses but strengths. The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Coalition would become reality, with Station Babel as its headquarters. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, Commander Reeves turned to Thara. Did you ever imagine, when you first stood before the Meridian Council, that it would lead to this? Thara watched the diverse species mingling freely, sharing ideas and making plans. Actually, yes. Not the specifics, but the possibility. That's what humanity brought to the galaxy, not just solutions, but the ability to imagine better possibilities. Dr. Meyer's translation protocol hums softly in the background, no longer just translating words, but facilitating the birth of a new era. The stars outside the station's windows seemed brighter somehow, as if reflecting the promise of what was to come. Humanity had done more than survive in the galactic community. They had shown that the very traits that made them different, that had helped them survive their death world, were exactly what the galaxy needed. The age of isolation was over. The age of convergence had begun. As the new coalition flag was raised, a design that somehow incorporated elements meaningful to every member species, the translation protocol captured a charade saying that would become the coalition's unofficial motto: in diversity, we find unity. In change, we find strength. In humanity, we found both.